to the European Heritage Policy, Agora, and this is now my great pleasure to introduce the panel 3. Panel 3 on fundamental values of beauty and sustainability at the core of Europe's green transformation. The Commissioner spoke about the beauty. That's something that we are very much attached, and we have very special guests from the European Parliament. But first to introduce Jimmy Jamar, head of our Brussels office, a great European from Belgium, who will be moderating this panel, and he will introduce the inspirational pitch and also the panelists. Jimmy, la parole est à toi.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to be moderating this third and last panel. We've been discussing this morning a number of threats that we are witnessing in Europe. And these threats are indeed brutal, all three of them. We spoke about at length about the geopolitical threat and the brutal attacks and it is indeed brutal when a country attacks and invades another country. We talked about the attacks, the more, I would say, civilizational or humanistic attacks when our values are attacked. And indeed, again, we see examples of brutal attacks from inside, from outside on our fundamental values. And then, but we should not forget, in the context of this summit, to speak, of course, about the third major threat, the environmental threat, which has, I would say, also growing negative effects and for which we need to find responses. Now, the important thing is that, and that's something that's important in our general statement about the role of cultural heritage in Europe, is that cultural heritage is intrinsically linked to all three of these threats. And I think there's a global realization, I think a growing realization at political level that about this role of cultural heritage. And this is, I would say, a beginning of a response to what Sneska and I have been fighting for years now, to get rid of the silos and to place cultural heritage at the center also of the political priorities and the political preoccupations. But not only is cultural heritage linked to all three of the threats, it's also, and this is more important, it's also part of the solutions. And this is what we have to talk about, and then we're talking about this afternoon. We had, I must say, looking at the title of our panel, Beauty and Sustainability at the Core of the Green Transformation. We had a little internal debate, I must say, about can we talk about beauty on the occasion, in the moment when we have war in Europe. And very quickly, and I think this is also what the Commissioner said this morning, we came back to the fact that no, we must talk about it, because beauty is very much, I would say, is the expression of the tangible expression of our values. And beauty is very much at the heart of what we do at European level. And if we are talking about the future of Europe, as we are doing during this summit, well then we must also, of course, talk about beauty. And what is interesting in this panel today is that we are going to link beauty, sustainability, and the green transformation. And I think these three notions go very well together, and that's what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But first, because I know, and we are really appreciative that he came all the way from Brussels, and unfortunately he has to leave us very quickly, but many, many thanks to Marcos Sempere. He's a real friend. Also, we have been working a lot with him, and thank you for all, I would say, the fact of sharing all of this information with you in the European Parliament. Marcos, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy, for giving me the floor. It's a real honor to be here, and thank you, Sneska, for organizing this summit, and thank you to all your team. Beauty and sustainability at the core of Europe's green transformation. What an inspiring title for this third panel of the day we are enjoying today in Prague. I would like to focus on some of the words that compose this strong statement that represent so much to those of us who share the same passion for the cultural heritage. Beauty. What a special word. And what an important concept, which has only recently begun to be heard in the corridors and meetings rooms of the European Union. The new European Bauhaus has introduced it, how much this was needed. Beauty. Beauty understood as attraction to a place, as a feeling of belonging to a city, as an appreciation of a collective identity generated by our environment. In this concept of beauty, all of us here today understand that cultural heritage plays a key role. It is an identifier of this value. Sustainability. Today, we cannot reject if we want to move forward. With the environmental challenges in front of us, sustainability is no longer a choice. If we are to survive, we need to embrace it. Despite the many cultural dimensions on climate action, the words art, culture, heritage, landscape do not appear in the original text of the European Green Deal. But there are signs that this is changing and must change further in the European Green Deal if the European Green Deal is to succeed. Why? Because heritage conservation and restoration is the antithesis of the use and throw away spirit of the consumer society. It therefore plays and must continue to play a crucial role if we are to continue to build sustainable societies. In addition, we are all very aware about the importance of sustainability in heritage recovery. For the rehabilitation of our heritage to be effective, it must necessarily be sustainable. And from my point of view, as an architect, it must be an imperative when carrying out any action on heritage. The sustainable and sensitive upgrading of Europe's historic buildings while preserving Europe's unique selling point, its cultural heritage, provides an extraordinary opportunity to promote a post-pandemic economic recovery. But there is no recovery and no sustainable transformation if it is not an inclusive recovery, leaving no one behind. We must consider the places and the people who need it most. Another of the most important, perhaps the most important for me, dimension of the new European Bauhaus, inclusion. We must fight energy poverty, protect vulnerable households, and make buildings more energy efficient, accessible and affordable. In short, transforming our buildings, neighborhoods, and cities to improve the lives of citizens who need it most. At times like this, we must remember that the fundamental values of the European project, peace, respect for human rights, democracy, the rule of law, and respect for our shared history and cultural heritage. With the situation that it is being experienced as a result of Russia's illegal invasion, much of Ukrainian heritage has become the most threatened in the whole Europe. That is why we, in our parliament, have already shown and reserved support for its preservation, recovery, and reconstruction. A few months ago, the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture sadly announced that they have already recorded more than 150 cultural sites destroyed or damaged as a result of attacks. Now, it must be even more, as Sneska is saying, confirming that the alarming state of their heritage. What can we do about this? The first and most urgent thing is to open avenues of cooperation with Ukrainian institutions to provide logistical support to identify the heritage that has been attacked or destroyed. This is essential in order to know in detail the impact of the war on the heritage and how much will be needed to recover it. Next, it will be necessary to define the role that the European Union should play in the reconstruction of its heritage. Here we must have a strong response and put our policies at the service of this recovery of heritage, historic buildings and centers. In this respect, our Parliament has taken a position on the role that this new European Bauhaus can play in the reconstruction of historical and cultural buildings and monuments affected by the war in Ukraine. The new European Bauhaus must adopt an external dimension that seeks to assist Ukraine in the planning and reconstruction of cities. We share with Ukraine a common history and past experience, as well as the same challenges of the present and the future. And we must use our cultural heritage in all its diversity as a solid bridge to promote a sense of togetherness. This new European Bauhaus, by taking the right decisions, can give rise to a new European Renaissance, a paradigm shift, a new way of thinking, of inhabiting our spaces, of recovering our heritage and building our future. When we talk about regaining a sense of belonging, cultural assets, in particular heritage, arts, local crafts, know-how, together with natural assets as well as social assets, make a place unique. And here too, the principles of the quality of the built environment and of valuing it through education to learn to appreciate it are particularly relevant. Each time and everyone, when visiting a special place, should have the right to truly appreciate its beauty and spatial quality. Green transformation, beauty, and sustainability. I am a firm believer that architecture and cultural heritage can put all these concepts together and be at the service of citizens to fully improve their quality of life. We, in the European Parliament, have been committed to building this new European Bauhaus with heritage as one of the key pillars. The fundamental role of cultural heritage, whose conservation, rehabilitation, and dissemination has a lot to do with the sense of belonging that the European Commission talked about in its official communication, is inescapable. We must seize this opportunity to achieve a real transformation of our built environment. And as I always say, architecture can change our lives, but only good architecture can improve our lives. So in last, beauty, sustainability, and inclusion. The seed of the new European Bauhaus is sprouting all over Europe following these three principles. This movement comes to adapt spaces to the changes required by new lifestyles, combining sustainability, beauty understood as comfort, as adaptation of spaces to their uses, but above all, social inclusion, focusing investment on the people who need it most. The original Bauhaus in the past century came to democratize our houses, our objects, to make them more comfortable, easier to produce, more affordable. But 100 years have passed and the ways of living have changed much more than the space is built. But the time has come. The democratizing spirit of the Bauhaus has been revived in the European Union with the new European Bauhaus. It is time to transform our heritage, our buildings, our cities to improve the lives of the citizens who need it most. Let the seed grow. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Marcos. You actually transformed the theme of this afternoon into a real strategy, and looking, and you're right, and looking into also the issue of the opportunities offered by the new European Bauhaus. It's true that when we are in organizations such as us, civil society organizations, I mean, if we want, we can find ideas. Sometimes we need to express ideas, and that's where I would say the European Parliament is so important. But in the European Parliament, you must also find the people that are ready to take this idea on board and then carry them a bit further. And this is what Marcos Sempere has been doing for the last years. Let's go now a bit deeper into into the theme, and I'd like to welcome on stage our three panelists. Johanna Leissner, scientific representative of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, Riin Alatalu, who's the vice president of ICOMOS, and Bruno Rossignol, who is the head of program for climate and heritage at the European Investment Bank Institute. Since we are running a bit late, I would give immediately the floor to Johanna Leissner from the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends, colleagues, and supporters of cultural heritage. It was quite a miracle. We were able to quickly develop a vaccine against the terrible coronavirus. The terrible war in the Ukraine can be stopped immediately if only one word is spoken out by one person. But the ongoing climate change, we cannot stop immediately anymore. Why? Because the climate system is slow and inert to react quickly. What we see today as climate change, as the climate crisis, deadly temperatures, droughts, floods, hurricane, is the result of the emissions we have been putting into the atmosphere 30 years ago. And can you imagine? And since then, we have not been able to reduce the CO2 emissions. And the CO2 emissions of the past 30 years, where we have every year more and more of CO2 in the atmosphere, will bring even a much more worse climate. We are really in the middle of a climate crisis. This climate crisis impacts all of us, our societies, us as human beings, our civilization is at stake. And of course it has a tremendous impact, not only on the people, but also on our cultural heritage. We need to react now. We need to start to develop. And Europe reacted. And this is why I'm here today. I'm very honored to present to you in a very, very short overview the work we have been doing in the past 1.5 years about climate change and cultural heritage. We have been 28 countries, 25 member states, and 3 associated countries who have worked together in a respectful and peaceful way to look into what is the state of play in the different member states, what are they doing about climate change, but also what is happening on European Union. And here I can say, again, Europe is a pioneer. Europe is the first continent to give a political mandate to the expert group of 28 countries and to take stock, what do we do, what are the strategies to fight against climate change. We have asked in a first step our delegates from the 28 countries, what do you think are the most important threats to cultural heritage from climate change? And we started in 2021, and it was very evident that severe precipitation was listed as number one because we recently suffered, especially Belgium, northern France, Luxembourg and Germany, from this terrible flood, which normally occurs only in 1,000 years. And this is exactly where we have to be really very much afraid, because this kind of extreme climate events, like severe precipitation, long heat waves, droughts, sea level rise, this will happen much more often the more CO2 we put into the atmosphere. But also indirect threats, and that was discussed yesterday and the day and today. For example, when we have to abandon villages because of coastal erosion, because of melting of permafrost. And these indirect threats are also, of course, damaging our cultural heritage. Gradual climate change is posing also a risk to cultural heritage as materials corrode and degrade faster. High and low humidity have an important impact, for example, on organs. In August, there was a big concert announced in Nuremberg, in my hometown, but it had to be cancelled because the organ couldn't be played because it was much too dry inside the church. So also we have increase of pests. That is a big problem in museums, archives, libraries, historic houses. We have the dieback of vegetation, a big problem in historic gardens and cultural landscapes. And last but not least was mentioned migration of foreign species. We have new beetles, new types of mold growth, which we have never seen before. We come back, since this is a policy debate we are doing, and we looked into what are the different countries doing for cultural heritage and how they mentioned cultural heritage in their national policies. And we found that there are even today 9 countries out of the 28 which have no policies at all which mention cultural heritage and climate change. So, and there are, of course, some countries which mention cultural heritage and climate change, but not more. There is no strategy behind. There are a few countries which are far ahead the others, and I have to name again Italy. They have, in all the 3 policies, the sustainability strategy, in the National Adaptation Plan to Climate Change, and in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, where all the money comes from the European Union. They have really a program, also Spain, and you see the countries which have mentioned cultural heritage in their policies, you will see them highlighted in yellow. The core part of our work of 1.5 years was to collect good practice examples. What has been done already in the different countries to fight against climate change, to mitigate climate change, and to adapt our heritage. And this was the most difficult task. Why? Because our delegates, we did not know whom do we need to call, who has all this information. The cultural heritage sector is still very fragmented. No country had, except Italy, they had all the information collected at their ministry, but in the other countries, we had to call our colleagues, and it was like a criminal investigation to find all these best practice examples. But now we have 26 countries, 83 good practice examples. The surprise was, unfortunately, the Commission is not here any longer. Most of these good practice examples were driven by research projects. So research is an indispensable driver for the implementation to protect cultural heritage. And these good practice examples, you can find them, you can download them in 183 pages, is really a unique source of inspiration, and they can be upscaled. Just to conclude, some key messages. We have formulated 10 recommendations for the European Union and for the member states. And we have to say that we have still a lot of gaps. Although the European Union is a leader in research, we were the first ones to study scientifically the impacts of climate change on cultural heritage. We started already in 2003, 20 years ago, but not much happened in between. And we must build capacities. This is something what we have heard yesterday and today. We need to invest into people, into the upgrading of the skills. We need handcraft people who can do the upgrading of our buildings. And we also have to invest into find out the intangible heritage. Because here we did not find a lot of information how the intangible heritage is most affected by climate change. And another important message is it is more climate friendly to repair the old houses which are maybe not even protected than to demolish. And with this, we can not only fight against the climate change, we can also fight against the housing crisis, as we heard yesterday, this fantastic example. And at the very end, it's also about money, of course. We need that local, national, and regional decision makers incentivize the cultural heritage sector. It cannot only be done by private measures. We need monetary and fiscal policies, because so far we have no data about the economic costs of what will that cost us if we adapt and mitigate our cultural heritage against climate change. We need a kind of stern review on the economics of climate change costs for cultural heritage. And then I'm at the end, and thank you very much. And if you want to know more about our report, you can download it from the internet. And I'm also here to answer some of your questions. And thank you very much. And I think protecting cultural heritage will help to solve the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johanna. I think this was a very powerful, very concrete also expose of, the threats that lie in front of us. And coming from, I would say, the leading institute worldwide dealing with applied research, I think this was a very powerful. Thank you also for presenting the results of your study, because I think you chaired this group. And as you said, you are presenting it to the institutions, and we will help you and do our work. This is a collective exercise. And I think each one of us can, must help in carrying these messages to our political leaders at all operational levels, because it's not only, I would say, the top leaders, but this is something that concerns, I would say, deciders at every operational level, from the local one up to the national one. So thank you very much for this. And now from the leading World Organization in Applied Research, the leading organization dealing with the protection of monuments and sites. We are very happy to have with us today the Vice President of ICOMOS, and very glad to greet Riin Alatalu. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting, and thank you for your presentation. It made a good setting. As you know, ICOMOS consists of more than 10,000 relatively serious people, and we are working on daily basis also as heritage experts, and that means that our system, how ICOMOS operates, is the national committees and the international scientific committees, but also through our daily jobs, we try to sneak in with all the heritage issues on daily basis. And of course, we are very, very happy to collaborate, and we think it's really very, very important to collaborate with other NGOs and organizations, and therefore I'm very grateful that we are given floor here too. But I think you agree that if we lived in an ideal world, then working as a heritage professional is like a dream job, because we are working with something that is beautiful, sustainable, about history, about culture, and it's so inspirational what we are doing every day. And if it were an ideal world, then I think the heritage people were supposed to be the opinion leaders in daily life questions. But we know that it's not the truth, and usually when it comes really to decision making and policy making, then the values and cultural heritage is set aside. And I'm rather sad to say that we all fear that also in Ukraine now, when we are listing how many monuments are destroyed there, the day the recovery starts, we have to really fight hard to protect the rights of the values and heritage in the recovery process. And it's a bit similar also with climate change issues, and also we remember well when European Green Deal started, the cultural heritage issues were sort of minor, even though we constantly repeat that heritage is about sustainability in all senses. And therefore, I'm extremely happy, and you all know it, that Europa Nostra and ICOMOS in collaboration, we created this document, Cultural Heritage Green Paper for Europe, which was a heritage position in this Green Deal issues. And I think this document is one of those that we call inspirational documents, because our biggest job is to communicate what we are doing and to communicate the heritage interests. And I'm definitely exaggerating that if to say that the green paper you can read like a novel, but it's in a way it's so well written that it's really very, very easy to understand on all different levels, and this is really important. And in addition to this green paper, which by the way, we have to double check with you also that how much it is translated into different languages, but I know that our ICOMOS colleagues, for at least in Latvia, have translated it into Latvian. And we have several inspirational documents in ICOMOS, what we promote. One of them is the future of our past, and also the quality principles. And the quality principles are for EU-funded projects that have potential impact on heritage. And that means that almost all the EU-funded projects, and not just inside Europe, but also outside where the EU funding is available. And the quality principles is also drawn as sort of like inspirational documents. It should be very easy to read. And we have invested now recently quite a lot of effort also to translate it in the means of communication. And it's translated not only into the big languages like German or Spanish or Italian, but also Macedonian, Estonian, of course, Georgian, and other small languages, which makes it important to implement them on local level when it really comes to decision making. So, but I think that was most of what I wanted to talk, and I think I have used my 5 minutes with this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Riin. And thank you for stressing, first of all, also the notion of sustainability, which we had a bit less touched upon in the previous addresses. And the other thing is, of course, you mentioned this green paper and the cooperation that we have. And I think there's one common point between the green paper that we produced together and the green paper that the Frau has produced, is that these are rather short documents, very much to the point, very practical, as you say. And this is how, if we want them to be, I mean, we are in a time when we have to act. I mean, there's no more time to go into lengthy discussions. I mean, there are things to do, and these things have to be expressed in a simple way. And as you said, I mean, and then translated and carried, I would say, to people that can also act on the ground. It's not, we rely sometimes much too often on the decision by, I would say, the the decision takers at the highest level, but I mean, everybody has to contribute in this, and the sensitization has to come, I would say, towards everybody. So thank you very much, and I would say I saw some points, really some points of convergence between these two documents. And I'd like to, because we mentioned about the institutions, and I talked about the role of the European Parliament, but there's another institution with whom we at Europa Nostra have developed, I would say, a very close cooperation, but also aiming at exactly at the same type of objectives. And we are conducting this very fruitful Seven Most Endangered program together, which is proving to be a very powerful tool. So I'm very pleased to have with us our friend Bruno Rossignol, who is the head of the program for climate and heritage at the European Investment Bank Institute. Bruno.
Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here in Prague today. Some years ago, the Palazzo Strozzi in Milan organized an exhibition about money and beauty. It was subtitled Bankers, Botticelli, and the Bonfire of the Vanities. It is true that money and art have a long relationship. Rich people and bankers are often art lovers, as we can see in this magnificent palace we're in, even though at the European Investment Bank we have an art collection, a modern art collection, and that deserves a visit to Luxembourg, cannot say that beauty is among the list of our financing priorities. Does it follow that we do not take beauty into account? I don't think so. There is beauty in the urban renovation investment projects that we support directly or through what we call urban framework loans, in which have a strong cultural heritage component, like in Malta, Belsen, or Limerick. There is also beauty in the Seven Most Endangered program that we support with our friends from Europa Nostra, contributing to saving sites, like the carillons of Mafra National Palace in Portugal, or the Buzluca Monument in Bulgaria. Now, do we do it for the sake of beauty? No. We do finance cultural heritage projects because they contribute to European identity, attractiveness, and economic growth. Cultural heritage is a key asset contributing to making Europe the world's #1 tourist destination. Tourism accounts for 10% of the EU GDP, and 1 in 10 enterprises in the EU belong to the tourism industry, employing 13 million people. Cultural heritage refers to constantly evolving knowledge and traditions, promotes cultural diversity, and last but not least, it supports the achievement of sustainable development goals. As the Bank of the EU and as the EU's climate bank, the EIB supports sustainable development in Europe and around the world. Sustainability is a guiding principle across all our operation. This includes borrowing, financing, and technical advisory. It is embedded in all of our activities, and in 2019, we decided to stop financing fossil fuel projects, dedicate 50% of our lending to climate-related investment projects, and to make all of the projects that we support in agreement with the Paris Agreement on Climate. This is a difficult task. We have implemented what we call at the bank the Climate Bank Roadmap to make sure that all of the projects and all of the missions that the bank is carrying out are synchronized with our climate goals. Now, there are 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, economic, also known informally as planet, people, and profit. Environmental, it's quite easy. Social, also quite easy. Economic development is probably the trickiest one for cultural heritage, because cultural heritage ventures are often not directly profitable and cannot be profitable. Their economic sustainability should therefore be treated differently as a common good, like the water we drink, the air we breathe. The transformation to our decarbonized model of economies, cultural heritage and culture in general should not be seen as an obstacle, but as a vehicle. Like Sneska says, like a vector, not a sector. And this is because cultural heritage can provide the glue that will be necessary to transform our economies, as we have seen in the paper mentioned by Riin on the EU Green Deal and cultural heritage. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bruno. When you mentioned beauty and the commitment actually that your institution has to beauty, when I was talking about beauty in the beginning and saying in this little internal debate, can we talk about beauty at this particular conference? And we are also looking at the atrocities that are happening just a few hundred kilometers from here. And then when you think about it, that beauty and referring and linking it to values is also one of the things that actually this continent has given mankind. I mean, our cultural heritage is really the expression of this beauty, and this is why I think our area is so important, and that's why I think it's so prominent. We have to change, and we are striving to change also, I would say, this vision that we have, that deciders have, and saying, okay, it's not only cultural, it's not only, this is, I would say, the essence of where we are going, and beauty and, I would say, sustainability of our actions in the area of climate change, of green transformation, are absolutely essential. I promised Sneska that we would make up a bit of the time. We still have a few minutes. Are there any questions that you would like to address to our speakers? I don't see any particular questions, but what we will do, because we have amongst us, and we didn't greet them more specifically this afternoon, we have amongst us our young heritage ambassadors, and I really thank them for coming. I think they deserve also a round of applause. We applauded them yesterday, but I think they worked all this morning, and it's really nice to have them with us this afternoon. We will distribute to you, I would say, the links to the documents. I mean, you can find them, you know about them. We will do them, both the Fraunhofer and the Green Paper, but also the link to what we are doing with the Institute about the 7 most endangered, because I think this is something, again, which creates awareness for all of us. So this was a short session, because it's actually giving us some food for thought, bringing these words together and looking into what we have to do urgently in the future. Thank you very much to all.
Just before I leave the floor, sorry, Sneska, I won't be long. There are EIB offices in all of the EU capitals. Don't hesitate to get in touch with them, particularly since there is a hub now in Krakow and there is a hub now in Athens. Do not hesitate to liaise with the EIB offices in all of the EU countries. Second, we've launched recently 2 financial instruments together with the Commission. One is an instrument to finance energy efficiency, and another one is to support new European Bauhaus projects based on the architecture of the Jessica Fund that I guess some of you already know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you, all the panelists. It's again the demonstration of the power of partnerships and power networks. And we have so much to do. We have the narrative, we have the inspirational documents. Now we have to fight to implement them into practice. So it's quite a task, but if we work all together, we can manage. So before giving the floor to the representative of all those wonderful young participants who joined us here this afternoon. We also have one short video that is somehow illustrating the panel that we have just had, the panel on beauty and sustainability, and it has been prepared by our friends from the European Union Youth Orchestra. Marshall, I can't see you. Are you here? You are there. Yes. So wonderful initiative. European Union Youth Orchestra had an initiative of Café Bauhaus. So that was their contribution to the new European Bauhaus. And this is now one short video called Troy Baritz, Natural Stories, the Cross Art Concert. So, music, culture, landscape, nature. Video, please.
La vie est un mouvement, le cercle. Nous sommes nés avec l'intuition. Mais nous avons appris à l'écouter et à utiliser l'art pour créer les histoires. Nous avons appris à observer le monde qui nous entoure. Nous nous appelions Troubadours, les premières femmes troubadours.
I have always been fascinated by finding the core of things and the way to connect what has been disconnected and put into the separate boxes. Connecting musicians and different audiences, connecting music from different times, connecting music with space and different forms of art. When I heard the story of the first female troubadours, Troubadours, I thought, we also have our modern storytellers, the female artists. The stories about art, culture, diversity, humanities and ecology will be musically performed by Ensemble S in 4 different places in Paris and with no carbon footprint.
A concert about nature and ecology takes place in a former renovated railway station, Voiquins at Petite Ceinture, where the idea of rethinking common space and taking responsibility for what's around us has its reflection in musical meditation and poetry performed during the concert.
My name is Anna Cook and this is my project, Troubadours, les histoires naturelles.
The project has received an EU Café Bauhaus Award as an example of the new European Bauhaus launched by President von der Leyen.
So much energy, inspiration and creativity coming from the young generation. And that's why it is now my very special pleasure to give the floor to the spokesperson. I don't know the name, but I know that you have selected the spokesperson who will convey to the European Cultural Heritage Summit the messages from the future East Heritage Summit that brought to Prague about 80 participants from 30 different countries, and not only European, but also countries across the globe. And this is a wonderful initiative that was initiated by our 2 prominent member organizations from the Netherlands, Erfgoed Gelderland and Erfgoed Brabant. It started in 2018 in Berlin, the European Cultural Heritage Year and Cultural Heritage Summit in Berlin. Afterwards, we also had a wonderful collaboration in Athens in 2019. This initiative continued to develop. And here in Prague, they came together also with the support of ESAG, the European students involved in cultural heritage, born also in 2018, and the Climate Heritage Network Youth Forum. So you can see so many networks coming together, bringing the energy of the young generation. I had the joy of greeting you at the very beginning of your 3 days intense exchanges and learning process in Prague, and I look so much forward to hearing now what is your message that you want us also as Europa Nostra to, together with you, to promote for a better Europe and a more peaceful Europe. So, the spokesperson, who is that? Oh, several, of course. And the title is Without Young Professionals, No Future for Heritage. I think that's the title. So, the floor is yours.
A very good afternoon to all of you. It is indeed my pleasure and honor to be the representative of both ASAC, European Students Association of Cultural Heritage. I have many of my colleagues here. And of course, FISH, which is Future is Heritage, to conduct the Future is Heritage Summit. It is more than honorable that today the participants themselves will share with you what is it that they learned from the 4-day summit that we organized over the past 4 days, where we tried to have an inclusive exchange, intergenerational exchange between these young participants and established professionals. However, more than that, I would say that the key issues is what we are here to discuss. And through the 4 themes, which was heritage and inclusivity, contested heritage, heritage in times of conflict, of course, and personal development in heritage, today we stand here in front of you with each of these bringing the key words that we learned from all of these 4 themes. I would now request the first person to please take away the stage from me and tell us about your experiences.
Thank you very much, Meetali. And I invite all my fellow colleagues to stand up because we as youth stand out for our values. And more than 30 nationalities, as you hear, and around 80 participants. The Future is Heritage Summit has indeed united young people across Europe and beyond it. And while diving into deep discussion, while exchanging ideas and networking, we were truly interconnected. In the same way, the heritage area is being a crossing point of multiple disciplines. Having focused on an interdisciplinary approach to heritage, we have addressed it from various angles and perspectives, covering different topics. Some of them were difficult to touch on, but very important, like contested heritage, through acknowledgement, community engagement, and reflection on it. We, of course, talked about sustainability, as our colleagues did before us. We brought up this issue as well and learned how to advocate for tackling climate change and combating it together and through heritage. Indeed, in combinations of and in collaborations of disciplines, generations, communities, that's where magic and innovation happen.
As inspiring as this interdisciplinary collaboration undoubtedly was, we also realized over the course of the Future is Heritage Summit that in spite of our many different backgrounds, young professionals in all areas of the cultural heritage sector face similar challenges today, namely the lack of equal opportunities. Emerging heritage professionals today face serious obstacles in our quest to preserve and promote our European heritage. They're the most qualified among us. Young professionals with the highest quality of education and extensive volunteer experience struggle to find permanent positions that offer stability and a livable wage. All too often, unpaid and unfairly paid work is accepted as the status quo, a necessary stepping stone in order to achieve the experience needed to advance our careers. The path of advancement is often unclear, and concrete job offers are seldom followed up on. Volunteering is, of course, a worthwhile practice in and of itself and can be very rewarding in terms of personal development. Volunteering should be a choice, not a mandatory path, and is certainly not a substitute for paid labor. If the future of heritage is indeed the youth, as Sneska Mihailovic often mentions, it is essential that young professionals in the cultural heritage sector are treated as equal partners in our collaboration with more established professionals. We ask those established professionals here today and in a position to take action to consider the inclusion of a youth-focused group or an intergenerational mentorship program as part of your organization. Those of you who belong to organizations that already have a designated youth group, we ask you to ensure that the inclusion of young people goes beyond mere tokenistic representation and that young voices are present and listened to in decision and policy making. As was so clearly demonstrated by many of the prize-winning projects at the European Cultural Heritage Awards last night, young professionals have a vital role to play in the vibrancy and growth of the cultural sector. We ask established professionals to support young professionals in the cultural heritage sector, not just because you can help us, but because we can help you. Given a seat at the table, we will prove our undeniable value over and over.
Because, as you might have seen from what my dear colleagues and peers just expressed, and on behalf of a whole generation of emerging heritage professionals, the message is quite clear. Our passion and our commitment for the cultural heritage are immense. We put in the work to learn, going through apprenticeships, bachelor's, master's, PhDs, specialization courses, and so much more. We juggle at the same time jobs, studies, internships, and numerous side projects. We sacrifice, we grind, propel ourselves forward. We are able to stand at the same table with everyone else to brainstorm together and innovate on the best possible goals, the best possible ways for our common goals. We have the skills, the drive, the motivation, and the ambition. And we are more than eager to build bridges. Because at the end of the day, cultural heritage is what makes us human. It encapsulates our stories and our memories, and it trickles down in the very fabric of our daily lives. As we've seen, for example, in the heritage and inclusivity section, when we looked at how cities can facilitate civic engagement, our sense of community, belonging, well-being, and our togetherness, and focus more on the ways cultural heritage can unite more than it can divide, and the exercise in empathy we so desperately need. But how are we going to do that now and on the long term is something that we are more than open and willing to explore and co-create.
Over the course of the Futures Heritage Summit, an important topic that was frequently mentioned is the one of sustainability, and we mean that in every sense. This term is a multifaceted one and covers a range of concepts, but we, as a group of young people with a shared passion and interest, have taken this opportunity to emphasize a special kind of sustainability. Through communication, especially over the past 4 days, we have realized that as young heritage professionals, we are faced with obstacles while attempting to incorporate ourselves into the vast heritage sector. Therefore, this poses an important question. Is the heritage sector sustainable for young heritage professionals? And to depict even more what we are referring to, I will quote my dear colleague, Miruna Goman, all that we want is for the energy and commitment that we have for heritage, not to go to waste, not to be migrated into other sectors in order to survive, and not to lose ourselves. If we do that, then the whole sector, society, and our Europe will suffer too. Who will be left in the future to do all this work needed to share our cultural heritage? And now, while talking about our Europe, our values, and our hearts, allow me to, with great pleasure, pass the microphone to the lovely Anastasia Putilina, a fellow participant from Ukraine, and hopefully a future collaborator and colleague in our wonderful yet challenging sector. And I would kindly ask you for a round of applause for Anastasia.
Thank you so much. The Future Heritage Summit is an open platform for all young people to speak out and make real changes. And I used this opportunity to had the chance to speak out and talk about something what is important for all Ukrainians. I talked about several historical aspects, such as the origins of Ukraine, centuries of colonization, and also the Russo-Ukrainian relation. And I think it's finally time for all Ukrainians to strongly demonstrate their national identity and talk about their country's heritage and their country's history and to break stereotypes about them. And we have talked about different strategies on how to safeguard heritage in wars and conflicts, and I have seen the strong reaction of the participants. I have seen that people are asking questions and are trying to understand the whole situation, and it makes me really glad because I understand that those people are going to involve into research, into projects, and they are going to use this knowledge and this experience in their work. So I understand that by sharing this knowledge, I'm making a real change. And after this conference, I wish to have more opportunities for young people in the heritage sector. And I also hope to inspire all Europeans to contribute to the heritage sector, especially in the sectors of countries which experience the wars and conflicts. And taking an opportunity, I would like to speak about the Crimean Tatars. These are the indigenous peoples of Ukraine, and they are considered to be the fourth most discriminated group of indigenous peoples in the whole world, according to the United Nations. And not only their human rights are endangered, but also their heritage is destroyed and is being destroyed each day by Russians. And one of such examples is the Bakhchisarai Palace, which is one of the most ancient heritage sites of Muslims in Europe. And I have seen horrible pictures of tiles, bricks, and different artifacts of this palace. And the idea is that Russians are restoring this palace, but actually they are destroying it. And by doing so, they are destroying the identity of Crimean Tatars. And Crimea is Ukraine, of course, so they are destroying Ukraine. And I just want to share with you some experiences on the international arena which Ukraine has made. We have already had some conversations, consultations about that with UNESCO, and it was only conversations, nothing followed after that. So I know that you are a great and very perspective organization, so on behalf of all Ukrainians, I'm asking for your help, not only for this palace, but for hundreds of endangered heritage sites and practices and even traditions which are being assimilated or being appropriated. By doing so, by supporting us, you are going to get a lot of benefits. You are going to receive knowledge and very valuable experience. And this you can use in your research and in your further work. This includes not only conservation, but also tourism, security, and even diplomacy, which are all inevitably connected, interconnected with heritage. By doing so, you will also make Europe more inclusive, more secure and stronger. Thank you so much, and Slava Ukraini!
As I started, and now I would want to end with this crisp, short, but I hope impactful and effectful presentation by our young generation. On the screen, you see the most prominent question that popped up after the summit. I hope that this actually leaves an impression on you, and may we do something towards it. Thank you all. We hope to see you next year.
Thank you so much for these forceful voices, forceful messages. We heard you. I can't promise you that we will on a short term increase the employment in Europe, but we are not as powerful as that. But you have made an extremely convincing case, and we will be working together. If we work together, I'm sure that we will, in any case, get to a better situation than we have now. Okay. Probably my notes were lost because I somehow do not want to end. I don't want to end this summit in Prague and this Agora. Yeah, there is an element of sadness that we have come to the end of an extraordinary journey, an extraordinary program, but we still have a number of extraordinary messages and representatives of very important partners that we have asked to sort of share with us some final messages and some remarks, hopefully based on the inspiration of your stay with us and participation in the summit. And before, so we have here, you see, I think, no, I see it here, who are the panelists, but we have 3 persons who are in person here, and I would like to invite to join me on stage. And this is, of course, our dear Kateryna Chuyeva. I don't see you. I hope that you are here. Yes, of course, you. Please, Kateryna, Vice Minister of Culture and Information Policy from Ukraine. You arrived among the first ones, and you are still with us. A proof how much you are committed to strengthening our collaboration. So, while you are coming on the stage, I also want to invite Luisella Pavan-Woolfe, Director of the Council of Europe office in Venice. Luisella, we have been speaking so much about the European Union, but there is a Council of Europe, and it's so important that you are here, and you are also a bridge with our previous summit in Venice, because you have also been with us and contributed to our discussion in Venice. And last but not least, dear Marshall Marcus, Secretary General of the European Union Youth Orchestra, fantastic partner, inspirational force in the world of Europe of culture. Again, a bridge with Venice, important one, but we work together in Venice and you are with us again in Prague. But now we would start with, I hope again, that the technology will work and that we will be able to establish a direct live connection with the President of the European Committee of the Regions, Vasco Alves Cordeiro. Do we have the connection?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can and hear you. We can also see you. Mr. President, welcome to Prague.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Are you talking from Brussels or from the Azores?
I'm talking from the middle of the Atlantic, from the Azores.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for being with us. You have been with us also in Venice. At that time, you were first vice president, but now you are leading the most important gathering on regions and cities in Europe. And we would very much like to hear your message for this important Agora with the title For a Value-Based and Culture-Driven Europe. What is the view of the regions and cities?
Well, thank you so much for having me, dear Madam Secretary General of Europa Nostra, fellow members of the panel, dear participants. I am honored and proud to participate in this year's edition of the European Cultural Heritage Summit, which takes place at a dramatic moment in the history of our continent. I just want to start by thanking Europa Nostra for its leadership and for its members for the invitation to address you today. Europa Nostra is a valuable and recognized partner of the European Union and Europe's cities and regions. And as President of the Committee of the Regions, I would like to underline your outstanding contribution to the preservation of Europe's culture and to the promotion of its cultural heritage. Your almost 60 years of activity are a testimony of resilience and perseverance in safeguarding and promoting our continent traditions, values, and culture. Less than 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege to welcome Mr. Meetali Gupta, Chairman of the Association of Ukrainian Cities and Mayor of Kyiv, at our COR Bureau meeting in Prague. On behalf of the European Committee of the Regions, I reiterated our unwavering support to Ukrainian cities and regions, and I assured him that the EU regions and cities will continue to back Ukrainian local and regional authorities over the long term. We discussed the consequences of the war against Ukraine and how the newly formed Alliance of Cities and Regions for the Reconstruction of Ukraine, an initiative led by the Committee of the Regions but gathers other organizations across Europe of cities and regions, could support Ukraine's local communities as they try to cope with the effects of Russia's invasion. With winter approaching, reconstructing Ukraine must be a priority. And in that reconstruction effort, we also need a specific focus on Ukraine's culture, infrastructures, and patrimony. Just like Russia cannot undermine Ukraine's resolve, it will not destroy its history, culture, and identity. We welcome the further 5 billion euros in macro financial assistance loans to Ukraine recently proposed by the European Commission, as well as the announcement by President von der Leyen to provide 100 million euros to rebuild damaged schools. EU local and regional authorities are already working with cities and regions in Ukraine for this. Alongside culture and cultural heritage, education is key to give Ukrainian children a sense of normalcy and to continue to strengthen their links to our European family in the context of the accession process. We called on the European Commission, member states, and all donors to give the financial means to EU local authorities so as to support their Ukrainian counterparts in rebuilding their facilities. A peer-to-peer approach is, in our opinion, the way forward in order to strengthen capacity building and to facilitate exchange of know-how on an equal footing. We need to work fast to make sure the winter will not put European solidarity at risk. I've mentioned the importance of helping Ukrainian children to continue their education in our schools and to enjoy, to the extent possible, a normal childhood in our country. Education gives young people the necessary skills and knowledge to find a job, and make a living. But why are culture and cultural heritage equally so very important? The previous panels have shown that cultural heritage is a catalyst for peace and solidarity. And I would also point out what culture helps to achieve. The removal of barriers to understanding, of fear of the unknown, and a lack of trust towards the outside world. The result is more tolerance and openness to new ideas, to new concepts, to new people, leading to enrichment, innovation, and progress, and a bigger sense of belonging to a common project, to our European project. Cities and regions not only provide the bulk of funding for culture in most areas of Europe, but they also act as laboratories for cultural and creative experimentation and innovation, and they play a key role in the development of cultural and creative clusters. Depending on the respective governance structure in each member state, local and regional authorities play a key role in developing and fostering culture, especially in protecting cultural heritage and promoting artistic innovation. Local authorities have an extensive role in what regards to cultural infrastructures, strategy, planning, networking. Local authorities also support arts and culture venues and deploy extensive investments in young and creative talent. In relation to cultural clusters or creative districts, we need to position cities and regions at the hub of knowledge networks in order to fully benefit from the free movement of ideas, of capital and people in the global network economy. The new European Bauhaus initiative plays a crucial role in this sense, and after only 2 years since its launch, it is already showing results in the ground all over Europe. The Bauhaus initiative is an excellent idea to link the mission of a climate-neutral and sustainable union with art and culture. It is indeed a bridge between the world of science and technology and the world of art and culture. And it builds on a rich legacy and on our cultural heritage. The Bauhaus story shows the need for local solutions that take into account the interests and desires of the citizens and are based on local ownership and inspiration. At the Committee of the Regions, we are convinced that a community investing in culture and education creates also more wealth, welfare, and safety. This simple fact holds true for a city, or a village, for a region, for a country, or for an entire continent. This is the time. This is the time when clouds are gathering across Europe to have a bold statement about the defense, the importance of culture as a bridge between difference, as a bridge to tolerance, as a bridge to more rich societies. I thank you for this opportunity, and I wish you great success to this year's summit during the days it took place. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I hope you have heard the very strong applause that here the full room, and the full room also full of young generation. That would be important to stress. And, you know, I wish every single president of a region or mayor of a city would speak as forcefully, as passionately about the importance of culture, cultural heritage, as you have just done it. And I hope that we can work together to achieve. I mean, it's a challenge, but we feel the very, very important energy coming all the way from the Azores. And we look forward to seeing you very soon in Brussels, because we want to bring to you the Prague Manifesto. We want also to bring you the many messages that during this summit we have gathered from our award laureates, young participants of the Future is Heritage Summit. So much energy and so much important messages. So we hope to see you very soon in person in Brussels, and next year in person at our summit.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
And also that you should know that we had the mayor of Athens also with us in person. The mayor of Lisbon will be addressing us with a message. So the importance of also the mayors, local authorities was very, very strongly emphasized. So let's join our forces, and thank you for your extremely important message.
Thank you.
So now, after this extraordinary exchange with the President of the Committee of the Regions of the European Union, and he spoke about Ukraine as well, very forcefully, we have with us Kateryna Chuyeva. Kateryna, I think yesterday you said, we wish to be like you, but you are so much a part of our family. I hope you feel like that. And Europa Nostra, for our Europe, has never been the Europe of the European Union only. For us, c'est la Grande Europe of the Council of Europe, and Ukraine is very much part of it. So after these 3 days of interactions, and how can we do even more to work together for a better Europe?
Thank you, Sneska. Thank you, dear colleagues, for inviting me for this close and unfortunately closed-in session. So it's a good question. I mean, when I told yesterday about we would like to be like you, it means not only that we are this Russian sentence about that Ukraine is like a small brother of somebody. So this situation, fortunately, completely has changed with within our situation, and after, I guess, we felt it exactly in 2014, that the situation in Ukraine changed so much, and our psychological situation and our, let's say, mood in society changed. And many of us understood that we must do many things by ourselves. That is why Igor has told about self-organizing civil society. And many, many other things started when just a critical amount of people in society understood that we can do many things by ourselves. What I would like to add, as for now, Ukraine, as many, many other countries, often looking for some kind of support. But when I told that we would like be like you, it means that our potential, our resources, our knowledge, one day became powerful enough to share with other people and to cover the needs of those who need support. We would like to join you in this kind of team, let's say, to be a partner for high-level project, high-level cooperation according to highest standards. That is a dream. And that is why we are discussing in Ukraine during last years, and especially now. It could sound strange in time of war, but we are really thinking about ecosystems of cultural heritage in Ukraine. We are now in process of developing this kind of ecosystem. We didn't have it before. During Soviet time, I will not mention Russian Empire, but during Soviet time, the most part of Ukraine was put in closed systems, so-called closed system. We do not have any normal connection with the democratic world, as you may know. And now we would like to change the basic level of this social construction. When we're talking about the communication between state and civil society, we must understand that ecosystem is the most appropriate way to achieve our strategic goals. And even if we do not have now many powerful actors, we must do everything to open this potential, to support this potential, to have these actors who can stabilize the ecosystems and let it develop. So I guess that our cooperation could be based on this, let's say, on this level. When we are talking about strategic things, our challenges in time of war, it's just a part of a huge system, and we must manage it. I hope all will be okay. We pay a very high price for our win in the war, but we must think now about the future. We really must to do how to say it. I'm sorry, I forgot the English word for it. We must prepare the base for this post-war period of development and recovery. And what is very impossible, I also noticed after this summit, during this summit, when we are talking with our colleagues from European Commission and with other colleagues from different organizations, it is very important that we, for example, take into account the problems of environment and ecological system too. During last decades, in Ukraine, we did not have, for example, such kind of a system which really support the which can protect environment and can bring it at a level of strategical decisions. And if we now take into account New Bauhaus and other projects where also Europa Nostra is involved or has initiated it, we can try to use it also for development, for making this ecosystem of cultural and natural heritage much more wider than maybe for a few countries who are really interested as for now. We can make it as a common value for a very high, very wide circle of participants and actors in this world, I guess. So it could be one of the most, in fact, most practical things. Because if we will return to situation in Ukraine and some our lessons from it, we have now, as we mentioned several times, and you may also have mentioned that the statistics could be different in our speech, but now we have up to 1,000 cultural heritage objects and cultural institutions ruined or damaged. It's a total statistic. It's every day we must do some new objects, etc. But it does not include, of course, all educational institutions or, for example, the damages of natural heritage object. And when we started to develop the evaluation system and damages assessment, we understood, for example, as my colleague from the Ministry of Environment told me, that we do not have examples in world practices how to evaluate so massive damages of environment caused by war. So there are so many challenges, and together we can develop it and can deal with it. It's also very practical. And what is also could be important, my colleagues from, let's say, young generation, it's a moment when I understood that I'm not young generation already, but it's really, it was a fascinating presentation, and I also thanks for it. We are discussing now in Ukrainian society and with our international partners some way to change our optics. I mean, we must decolonize starting our own mind, and that is why we have a number of discussions inside Ukrainian society about national remembrance, and also outside of Ukraine, including the international let's say, academic studies and many museum studies and many other things. It also could be a crucial contribution and very practical contribution, because many countries, many nations didn't have enough, a voice loud enough to change the situation. And if we will do it together, it will be much more easier. And of course, we will discuss a number of really practical things like financial or some other kind of support, but it could be done later. But today, it's very important to find all this, the most crucial points of further development. And I guess all of them are on strategical level. And then we understood better what we can do at operational level. Why I'm talking about this? I remember when I first time have heard about, you may also remember this situation in Timbuktu, when people saved priceless ancient manuscripts just by themselves when they were in danger. It was a very dangerous situation for all who tried to save these manuscripts. And we have the same situation, not the same, of course, but it reminds me when we started after the 24th of January to manage the process of evacuation of museum collections and many other things. I understood that we have learned a lesson. Of course, we have a lot of homework to do it better, but we started to think about it. We understood where we have the gap, where we can do and cover it by ourselves, and where we have to ask for support. And that is why we are very grateful that we are here. Thank you for all these topics concerning Ukraine which were raised today. I hope it's a start. So let us not to make closing remarks, but also some stones to the bridge to next conversation and meetings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kateryna. It's really impressive how you, with all your colleagues and all the people from Ukraine we have met, have heard here in Prague, the way how the power that you are transforming a tragedy into, in fact, an opportunity for a true new renaissance of your country. And that so quickly you have sort of shifted from the mode of reacting to the emergency to strategically thinking and knowing that this is going to be over and that your country is going to become be what it is, but not only one-off, but a leading. Because all what we have heard, I think you are giving us energy. I feel that you basically, with all what you're saying, that you have shaken all of us, that because you are really defending our values, a value-based, culture-driven Europe, and that's why we all have the task and the responsibility to be even more sort of involved in all that. So thank you. We have to thank you for this extremely important experience, and we will build many more stones, I'm sure, in a very strong bridge that we are going to build. And bridges, there is another wonderful city in Europe, not Prague, but Lisbon, with enormous bridges. Now it is my great privilege to share with you the video message that we have received from the mayor of Lisbon. You have heard that we have created a hub in Athens. Deputy Mayor of Krakow is also with us in Krakow, but Lisbon is another place that we are convinced. Antonio Lamas is here. I think we are hoping that with Lisbon also perhaps a hub will be created in Lisbon. But now, the Mayor of Lisbon, great European, Carlos Moedas.
Dear Secretary General of Europa Nostra, dear Sneska, dear organizers of this great summit and of the Europa Nostra Awards, dear friends, what a joy and honor to be here to address you with this message to the European Heritage Policy Agora. I really wish I could be there in person at the beautiful city of Prague with all of you. And I want to congratulate not only Europa Nostra, but also our hosts from the Czech Ministry of Culture, and especially the city of Prague, because it has been already 30 years since your capital was listed as a World Heritage Site at UNESCO. Congratulations to all of you. And I want to give a few words of appreciation to the European Commission, because I know the hard work that the Commission does every day to the single people of the European Union. And at this moment of uncertainty, it is ever more necessary to show that Europe works and delivers, that our motto of unity in diversity is real. And what is more directly concerned to this motto than culture? I always remember T.S. Eliot's warning to Europe that unity in the common elements of culture was the true bond between us. But for many years, we have believed that Europe was driven mostly by economic integration. We did believe quite too much that economic integration was enough to lead us to political integration. But these last few years have taught us that the opposite is true. Economics is not enough, and what we lacked was culture. And that is the key question today: how to put culture at the heart of change. Because yes, we live in a world of unstoppable change. We must deal with change provoked by the digital revolution and by climate change. Europa Nostra call to action for a new renaissance in Europe is a great example of what is needed to be done, to put Europe's shared heritage at the heart of the European Green Deal. And it is an example of the integrated vision we must share of culture, that culture is really everywhere. It influences every area and aspect of public policy. And this is to be considered at the European, national and local levels. Myself as a mayor, my great concern is this interchange between culture and our biggest challenges for the future. What has culture to do with climate change? Well, there is a clear connection between the energy transition that we must accomplish and the cultural heritage. Policies that foster ways of sustainable mobility, such as we have in Lisbon. And let me tell you, we are one of the first capitals to put free public transportation for the young people and for the elderly people. And that has an effect in a way we preserve historical heritage in a city, in a way that people see historical centers without pollution, in the frequency people visit monuments and museums. And what about culture and innovation? We must align culture and innovation because it is also the way the united history of all of us gets together with innovation around it. That is what we are doing in Lisbon, a city famous for being the gate of Europe to the Atlantic Ocean. We are uniting history and innovation in what it is going to be a world center for the blue economy in our new sea hub of Lisbon. And the last thing I want to say to you is about the way we must open culture to everyone, to create open spaces for cultural imagination and creativity. Bringing culture to our cities and neighborhoods means more and better citizenship. And that is tremendously important for Europe. My dear friends, putting culture in the heart of the change we must have means working on these close links between different subjects. And I'm certainly that taking these into account, we will be working on a Europe that cares about its culture and its heritage. Let me finish with a Portuguese reference, who is now also a European cultural reference. Helena Vaz da Silva, she once said that in recent times we have seen our awareness that if we don't take culture from the periphery to the center of politics, there will be not a true social renovation. If we want to work for a new European Renaissance, let's put culture where it deserves. Thank you very much and have a good conference.
I hope you agree that this was an extremely powerful contribution, and great to see that we have some visionary leaders at the head of extraordinary historic cities. So, Mr. Lamas, once again, could we ask you to transmit our, I think you're traveling back to Lisbon, so you can transmit to the mayor our warmest appreciation for his words, and we look forward to seeing him in November when we will have the Helena Vaz da Silva Award celebration in Lisbon. But we would like to discuss his vision and the way we can collaborate even more that virus spread, the positive virus should spread across Europe and beyond. So thank you for being our ambassador. And now from Lisbon, we go to Venice. We go to Luisella Pavan. You have an immense experience of working in European affairs with the Council of Europe. So seen from that wider perspective of La Grande Europe, but then anchored in Venice, what is your message for a Europe based on values and driven by culture?
Sneska, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It's been 3 amazing days, absolutely fabulous. And can I say one thing? I thought I'd be talking to an empty audience or an empty room. Everyone is still here, so it's a clear sign that it's been a very successful 3 days, and everyone is feeling enriched by this experience. What I've tried to do, well, first of all, I was chatting to some of the delegates, and I realized that not everyone understands the difference in between the European Union and the Council of Europe. So just 10 seconds. We are the older sister of the European Union. We've been there since 1949. We are in Strasbourg. We have a very narrow mandate if you compare it to that of the European Union, because we deal only with human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. But we've been looking at culture and cultural heritage for 70 years. And we've done this through a series, the adoption of a series of conventions. So we have legal texts which have been then translated into national legislation. Texts on culture, but also on the architectural or archaeological heritage, on the meaning of heritage for society, a number of very important conventions. We also have programs. One on the intercultural cities, another one on the cultural roots of Europe, and we work a lot with the European Union. And of course, as you mentioned, Sneska, we have 46 member states, so wider Europe, 47 till recently. Russia has been asked to leave the organization.
And this is the first time in the history of the Council of Europe.
I think it's the only international organizations which has actually asked Russia to leave. Russia is still formally everywhere, from the United Nations to OECD to OSCE, but no longer.
Which is the proof that the Council of Europe is a value-based organization.
And I'd like to start from values then. I've just jotted down a few key words, which to me are the key words that have come out of these three days. And the first one is values. Herman Partsinger started his presentation today by referring to values, and he spoke of social cohesion, of European reconciliation, and of course we've been speaking about peace. throughout these three days. Oksana spoke of gender equality and diversity, and linked both to culture and heritage. And of course, from Strasbourg, we've been dealing with cultural rights, which we consider fundamental human rights. We've been dealing with culture and heritage as aspects related to human rights and democracy. And Kostas Bokoyannis spoke of this very eloquently, of the three pillars: nature, culture, and democracy. So values, first of all. Participation, second key word, I think, which comes out of these 3 days, and particularly of some of the projects that have been awarded a Europa Nostra prize this year. Participation, because we've been looking at the way that culture should interact with individuals and communities. And the young people, just a few minutes ago, were talking about real participation. Participation should not be an empty token. Third key word, youth. And the Young People Summit has given us some really powerful messages. Heritage education and new technologies are fundamental if we want to retain young people's interest. And we need to, because if we don't have youth involved in what we are doing, our efforts will be thwarted by the indifference of young people. So we need them on board. Fourth key word, obviously, sustainability. This has come back many times, the Bauhaus, but let me, from my Venice observatory, say something very, very concrete. We can talk about sustainability, but we should not forget the impact that mass tourism has on cultural heritage. And I've seen it, we've been talking about bridges all the time, and on Saturday afternoon I had a quick walk down the Charles Bridge, and it's worse than the Rialto Bridge. You just cannot move. And this is something I think that an organization like Europa Nostra should address in a very concrete way and elaborate messages to policymakers at all levels, international, national, and local. Inclusivity, another key word that's come out of these 3 days. We should not leave anyone behind. We have not really spoken about migrants and the new Europeans, but we've spoken a lot about the consequences of the war in Ukraine, and amongst the consequences are the uprooting of millions of Ukrainians who have come to other European countries. Culture has the power to include everyone, and cultural heritage is a powerful healer that way. Looking ahead, this is something that you've asked me to do, Sneska. I think a few thoughts that come from these days' discussions. We've been talking about bridges. We've been talking about networks of organizations. These were the words of Robert Piawkowski this morning. we've been talking about coalitions of organizations, and I think we need to do even more that we're doing that way, because we're all working in very similar areas. The European Union, UNESCO, the Council of Europe, private and public foundations. We need to talk to each other and spread the good word, and so that what you're doing here is widely known and appreciated by everyone. So dissemination is important, and the fact that you're opening hubs everywhere, I think it's a good way forward. You need to disseminate and upscale some of the really good stuff that you've given prizes to. I've been talking to some of the Italian projects, and I hope I'll be able to have them all gathered in Venice. I really would like to do, we have 6 projects that have been rewarded this time, and I would like Italy to know about it, and other regions to see that some of these, what you've given awards to can really go beyond the regional frontiers to the rest of the country, and surely to other countries as well. But I'll start from Italy. So these are really my few thoughts from 3 very, very enriching days, and thank you very much to you and Europa Nostra for all you're doing for cultural heritage in Europe and beyond.
Thank you so much, Luisella. In very short time, you have brought so much together. It just shows how much Council of Europe and Europa Nostra, from day one, we are on the same wavelength. We were born in the office of the Council of Europe in Paris, location-wise. So it has, for 60 years, it has been an extraordinary mutual sort of inspiration. And thank you for the concrete proposal for doing something in Venice. I see that you will help us. I mentioned Lisbon and another hub, but Venice is also a very important candidate for a really, perhaps the hub of the hubs. And we would very much count on your help to perhaps make this happen. Now we have one speaker left for this closing session of our Agora. We have been talking so much here in Prague about the bridges and about music. Music was everywhere, huh? From the first act to the final act. Petr just told me that this is the concert hall where the Ma Vlast, My Country, Smetana was performed for the first time. So everywhere, in all the places, State Opera, the Museum of Music, music was everywhere. So that's why for the end, I think it's a perfect, you are the perfect, yes, you can go there. You are the musician yourself. You're not just the CEO or Secretary General of the orchestra. You are an eminent violinist, and you have dedicated your life to, I would say, music with a meaning and with a purpose. So Marshall, the floor is yours.
Before I really get into some of the remarks I'd been thinking of giving, I just wanted to say there have been 2 really extraordinarily inspiring aspects to what I've heard in the last couple of days since I've been here. One, which you just can't escape from, is you referred to it, this extraordinary ability that all of the Ukrainians here have shown that, no, we're not simply going to play the role of victim. We call upon you to work with us, but actually we have ideas about what we want. We know our place and are thinking strategically about how to turn this threat into an opportunity. So I just want to thank all of the Ukrainians I've come across. It's just been the most fantastic inspiration for that. My second real inspiration was, and in a way I'm not so surprised with it because I work a lot with young people, was just how impressive that session was this afternoon with all the young youth ambassadors, and how I'm always thinking in these moments, my generation, I'm not sure how good the audit is, but my God, I'm really impressed with the determination, the passion, the commitment, the drive, and also the determination to be taken seriously, to be on the stage, to be taken seriously and be part of what is done. So again, huge thanks to all of you there. Talking of thanks, also tremendous thanks to the City of Prague, to the Ministry of Culture of the Czech Republic, to the European Commission, and of course to Europa Nostra for this very opportune summit in such a challenging time in Europe. I'd like to start by actually praising not just today's Agora, but actually to praise the very idea of the Agora. As I think the Mayor of Lisbon said, a way of finding more and better citizenship. So this extraordinary, ancient, open, public space in which debate happens and values can be discussed. Of course, we're looking at value and culture-driven Europe. But what I'd like to talk about and argue for is approaching this in a particular way, something which the President of the Regions was talking about and which has been on the tips of tongues of almost every speaker, bridges. And I would like to stress the idea of bridge building together as the best route for a value and culture-driven Europe. I come, as you said, Sneska, from the world of music, actually from the world of orchestras. Once upon a time, orchestras were there simply to entertain. Then came the age of instrumentalization, where the musicians on the stage were no longer simply there just to play their music for what it might please, but actually to do it for some other reason. The first age of this instrumentalization was about the instrumentalization of the economic possibilities of orchestras and music and culture. So we in culture were told to get on the stage and do what we do to help the economy. Many of us in this world don't remember that phase with so much real pleasure. It's not that we had any problem with economics and thinking about it, but for us, it always seemed like the wrong kind of instrumentalism. Now, fortunately, the landscape is completely changed. It's a revolution. The type of instrumentalization we talked about is to be instrumental, but instead to foster and advance issues such as integration, diversity, peace, sustainability. This is nothing less than culture and cultural heritage as a bearer and a vessel for real value. If in culture we can really achieve this, then we can really change the world. But first, we have to orientate ourselves in the cultural field to deploy the power that culture and cultural heritage has until it can become this vessel for value. When culture successfully deploys value, culture can achieve not just anything, but everything. But to realize this vision, we have to go back once again to Greek terminology. I'm not trying to apply for a Greek passport today, but there's a bit of Greece that comes through today's ideas. We have to discover, I want to say, the rhetorical power of culture and our heritage. Rhetoric as the ancient art of persuasion through performance. Staring at our challenges in Europe, nothing of this seems to me possible unless we can become real bridge builders with culture, working together with value-driven culture effectively. This is what drove, for example, the European Union Youth Orchestra to create its Peace in Europe project in the weeks following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. 7 concerts were put together quickly from the Baltic to the Mediterranean and practically the border of Ukraine to the North Sea, all dedicated to the cause of peace and to highlighting the plight of victims of violence. As part of this project, the EUIO assists the Youth Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine in a project to enable these players to continue their work by helping raise funds, by opening programs such as our online learning program to the Ukrainian musicians, and by offering side-by-side performance possibilities between us and the orchestras into the future. In short, bridge building to help protect Ukraine's cultural platforms. I don't want to exaggerate the power and size of this particular project, but I do want to say that it's the responsibility of every person, all of us in the cultural and cultural heritage areas, to make our own, sometimes small, sometimes large practical efforts to help. As the strapline of our peace project says, standing with Ukraine. Even proclaiming this has its value. And as the Ukrainian Minister of Culture said, my request to you, he said, is not to be silent. And that is what we must make sure we do when we exit through the doors after this summit. But bridge building should also sit inside as well as in between our cultural projects. Now, I think every good speech probably contains a certain amount of theft. And I now want to just bring back some ideas that I talked about when we had our session in Brussels in June. And I then talked about the fact that as a metaphor, the bridge is infinitely plastic. And I was remembering the words of the young wunderkind conductor Gustavo Dudamel at the age of 26, when in the interval of a concert he was conducting, a very important concert for him, he was asked by the interviewer a very difficult question. What exactly is it that conductors are for? What makes a good conductor? He really spent his time thinking, and then he said, and I quote, I think the conductor needs to be more than a leader. You need to think that you are only a bridge between the composer and the orchestra. In just the same way, we must all be bridges between ourselves as humans and the beauty and the value that needs to be allowed into all of our activities, all of our transactions, if we are to feel fully human. So when we strive for peace, when we show solidarity, when we act sustainably, those acts are so much more powerful, more affecting, and more influential, if they are themselves bridge-building acts with culture. We become, that is, everyday bridge builders with value-driven culture all of the time. Now, perhaps you're thinking, but what does this actually look like in practice? In doing so, I'm going to give you an example now, but in doing so, I want to reach back a year ago, Sneska. I want to reach back to Venice and a concert that we performed. And that concert in the Redentore Church in Venice gave rise to conversations in the Giardini in Venice after the end of the concert, which then led on to a project which was an extraordinary example, I think, of what I'm talking about, and now it's landing to be talked about here in Prague. The example I have in mind is Alpha Mission Delos. During May of this year, there was an astonishing performance on the island of Delos in Greece, when the World Human Forum's Alpha Mission Delos was launched in the first ever concert on the sacred island of Delos in modern times. I hope we can maybe see a bit of the film now. As the beginning of this prize-winning film of the performance shows, Alpha Mission Delos demonstrates maybe the most important aspect of bridge building with value-driven culture. How many different bridges can you build? How many unconnected areas and people can you link together by the series of actions that constitutes and defines your life? Here is a project connecting the World Human Forum with partners ZDF, Arte, Europa Nostra, Greek institutions by the bucket load, the US's NASA Artemis project, musicians from Ukraine and Russia, the European Union Orchestra musicians, all mixed with Vivaldi's music and the haunting sounds of the thousands of years old Greek lyra. I have a better narrator who can talk about this now.
Ακίνητο θαύμα της πλατιάς γης. Εσύ που οι θνητοί ονομάζουν δήλο. Αλλά οι μακάρι θεοί που ζουν ψηλά στον Όλυμπο, τη λένε της μαύρης γης το φωτοβόλο αστέρι.
One of the extraordinary things about that film, which, by the way, a few days ago won a prize here in Prague at the Prague TV Film Festival, was that where does it come from? Actually, it didn't begin in Venice. It began with geospatial data and climate change in a project linking science and music, performed globally and born in Australia. The bridges go everywhere. In a later section of the film, we see and hear the end of the newly composed music by Carmen Fizzarotti that uses music from Vivaldi, but from our modern era, with the ancient lyra commentating back to Greece again, as if in the role of Greek chorus. I don't know whether we can see some of that. The point for us today about such a film is the way that it brings so many constituencies together, organizations, genres, arts, sciences, always, though, with value-driven beauty. Whether you made the hair of the bow of the lyra, or taught the artist Socrates who improvised with it when he was but a child, and now teaches his own child, as I saw in Delos, or are the camera operators that record, or the film mixer, or the makeup artist, the caretakers, the caterers who provided the food, the captain who happily took us backwards and forwards to the island to record, or an astronaut watching the film from space whilst on the NASA Artemis mission, or any of thousands of people, different types of arts who were making this film together and making it possible. The glue, which in the end binds every one of them, is the common endeavor of beauty. Not just the endeavor of beauty, but the common endeavor of beauty. The beauty of each and every crafted art from top to bottom. So here is my point. If we want art, culture, cultural heritage to really act as an effective force, we have to become better not only at rhetoric, but also at working together, better at using culture as the connector in a positive, value-driven Europe, and indeed a positive, value-driven world. This involves, I suspect, real change. Combining the sentiments of Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's State of the Union address and the prophetic, timeless words of Václav Havel's speech from 1996, which was earlier told to us by Hatzig, I think, and which is the motto of the Czech presidency. We must utilize the deep commitment of the cultural and heritage world to the defense of Europe's fundamental values, but with the awareness of Europe as a task. Rethink, rebuild, repower. And if it is urgent for us to act in defense of our values and the very existence of the European project, then this working together, this bridge building with value has to be the heart, the DNA and the soul of the endeavor. As the plenipotentiary of culture from Krakow said earlier, the future belongs to networks. I want to end with one final act of being better together with culture by doing it with all of us here together in this room now, and in doing so, by connecting the dots not just in Europe, but also around the globe. If we were to put up, as you have here, the UN's 17 Sustainable Goals, you would see that every issue of this Agora, the need to mobilize forces and voices in solidarity with Ukraine, the role of cultural heritage in fostering peace and solidarity within our societies, and the values of beauty and sustainability for an inclusive green transformation of them, each of them can be reflected through a number of these goals. But one element in this image is missing: culture. Of the thousands and thousands of words in the SDG's long articulation, I've looked at it, only 5 are the word culture or cultural. So in the last years, there has grown up a very, very interesting movement to include culture as a separate SDG in the post-2030 world. You can find it under the hashtag Culture 2030 Goal. Please do get out all your phones to have a look at that now. And today, we have a chance together to join that call. So this is the bridge that I offer all of us now as an example. As we gather here, across the world in Mexico City, a side event with worldwide cultural practitioners in Mexico in advance of the opening of UNESCO's Mondiacult Mexico 2022 is about to start. Looking at my phone, I see that it's in about 4.5 hours at 2 p.m. Mexico City time, 9 p.m. Prague time, to work on and announce a new zero draft for a culture goal. So, I thought, why not send a message from the European Agora to Mexico City? One of the organizers and drivers of the Mexico meeting, the expert Jordi Pascual of the United Cities and Local Governments area, promised me, I quote, "If Prague wants to send Mexico a message about culture and development, I promise I will read it out in Mexico in the meeting." Here is the proposed message. Dear UNESCO Mondiacult Mexico 2022, we hereby support the efforts of the Culture 2030 Goal campaign to have culture recognized as the 4th pillar of sustainable development and a new SDG in the post-2030 development framework with as much energy, backing and support as together we can muster. Following the focus of the Prague Agora of the European Cultural Heritage Summit 2022 for a value and culture-driven Europe, we propose that any new draft of a culture goal should include the importance of value as a driver and of the overarching need for culture to serve all peoples globally through common values. We wish you the very, very best in placing discussion of a culture goal onto the agenda of Mondiacult, thereby helping to make it a reality in the post-2030 agenda. Yours, the European Heritage Policy Agora for a Value and Culture-Driven Europe, Prague, 27th of September, 2022. So I have 2 emails waiting to go on my phone to Mexico now. One of them starts, Dear UNESCO Mondiacult Mexico 2022, I hereby support. And the second one goes, Dear UNESCO Mondiacult Mexico 2022, we hereby support. And I now need to ask you which of those 2 versions you would like. So can I hear, do you want to do this together? Yeah. Thank you for your applause. I need more. I need to hear the word yes. Yes? Yes!
Woo! We!
You're all very, very quiet compared to my orchestra. Okay, well, that's it. I'm now going to send the we message. If you just give me a moment to get the technology done. Okay, that's sent. As the wonderful commissioner said this morning, culture is our oxygen. It keeps us alive. So let's make culture and cultural heritage really work. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. You never, you will never stop surprising me in a positive sense, but also you will never disappoint me, because whatever task we give you, you surpass the expectations. And what I particularly like is that, many people come and make you proposals. Do this, do that. you came with a very forceful proposal to make the bridge between Prague and Mexico, but you came with a text, a perfect text, already with the email to send. That is the way to work. When you come with a proposal, you allow us to act immediately. So thank you for the beautiful, first of all, sort of final, closing, inspirational speech that you have made, connecting so many aspects of our Agora, for taking us to Delos, and also for taking us to Mexico. For that, you definitely need somebody who knows to orchestrate things. This is all in the choreography and orchestration and the music. So I really look forward to many, many more of this type of partnership where we, by coming together, we become better, because that's also what your orchestra, many people say stronger together, but you have launched the motto better together, and that's something which I think very much we support, and let's do it. Let's continue to do it.
And I must finally say the only reason that's possible is because of Sneska and her work. Sneska provides the perfect orchestra. Without that, the director is nothing.
Thank you so much. We have a few moments left. We have been applauding to so many people, but I want now that we applaud for the dream team of Europa Nostra. So I want them to come on stage, the ones who are still here, at least in the room. Some are still working around. But in any case, Manon Richard, who has been the person who coordinated this forum, come here, come, not just behind. Manon Richard with Lorena Aldana from the Brussels office. For months, Manon and Lorena, and with Jimmy, of course, in the Brussels office, that you have been masterminding and coordinating this Agora, this final act. So, Manon, we also want not just to see you, but to hear you. You know, how was that process of orchestrating the Agora and getting all those people together, and even the people in Azores and in Kiev to be together? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sneska. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was really a pleasure to coordinate the Policy Agora. It's been a long but efficient process, coordinating people online, but coming also from all over Europe. And I'm really delighted that we had very fruitful and inspiring discussions today. And I hope our key messages will inspire policymakers at all levels of governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manon. Thank you. You have also been our the driving force in our team for bringing the young generations together, because that was, we promised in Berlin in 2018, and look, 4 years later, with the pandemic in between, we really made step forward, and you have been in our team the person who brought it all together, so also thank you very much for that. You have seen Lorena this morning. I think Lorena is now flying. Manon, Lorena is already... She has left, but you have heard her in the morning. Is there anybody else? My dear Barbara, where are you? Is she still working? Somewhere, taking care that everything is well. Now, Barbara, Zander, and Walter, nobody's here yet. No, in any case, Walter Bramkos, Barbara, Beppe, Sylvie, Elena, Audrey, Louise, where are you? You have been my angel, my guardian angel. Stand up, Sylvie. So Louise, she took care that I'm there where I should be during these 3 days, and really taking so much care of so many connections with and liaison with so many people. So this is now the moment. I think you have a few moments where I would like to ask Petr Svodoba, because yes, there is a dream team, but if we would not have had Petr here in Prague, there would have not been such a successful and such an enjoyable European Cultural Heritage in Summit. So, Petr, you're still alive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for trusting that Mission Impossible can become Mission Possible. So you want to share with us a few words?
Well, Sneska, could I actually borrow a couple of words you used this morning? You know, I don't want to steal from your speech, as this was indicated by Marshall, so I would like to ask your permission. So is it possible? All right. Wow. What a meeting, what a day, what a summit. Full of emotions, full of energy, full of friendship. It's been really an excellent summit from my perspective, and I hope you have enjoyed it with me. I was supposed to have some closing remarks, and I just thought, well, maybe I will have 3 of them. One which will be related to the venue we are all sitting in at the moment, and 2 quotes on top of that. Well, in fact, it's been already somehow indicated that here in Joffin Palace, this was the first ever performance of Bedřich Smetana's set of symphonic ballads called Má vlast, My Country. This happened in November 1882. My country. I'm really glad that my country is part of our Europe, Europa Nostra. And the fact that we've got among ourselves so many our colleagues from Ukraine is a real proof of the fact that your country, Ukraine, is also part of our Europe, Europa Nostra. Welcome. And now, first of the quotes. This is in fact a quote of a big European and long-serving member of the European Parliament, Otto of Habsburg. He used to say that a person who does not know his history is not able to understand where he is heading to, because he does not know where he is. And cultural heritage is actually the anchor for us to understand where we are coming from. And this is also giving us the direction. And what is happening in the Ukraine now is that Russia is actually trying to demolish the proof of Ukraine identity, the proof of Ukraine nation, because they are trying to destroy as many cultural heritage sites as possible. And this is the reason why we need to raise our voices and activate all the resources to make sure that the cultural heritage of Ukraine will be protected and will be restored afterwards. So let's make sure that we will do our utmost best to help our friends in Ukraine not to lose their direction. And the last quote, in fact, it's been today a day full of quotations of our President Václav Havel. And I would like to add one more, and this is actually from the very early times, 33 years ago, during the times of the Velvet Revolution. And I hope that this Prague summit can actually build on the legacy of the Velvet Revolution and resonate with the quote which was all over the place during the autumn of 1989. And this was the quote Václav Havel was using during the early days, and it sounds, and it goes like that. The truth and love will prevail over lie and hatred. So I think it's so topical, and I hope this will help us to make sure that we will actually be able to secure this, the liberty, the freedom for Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Petr, I would say, for this very poetical end of our European Cultural Heritage Summit 2022 in Prague. Thank you, Petr. Thank you, Prague. Thank you, the Czech Republic. Thank you all also the technicians that without you, without all those cameramen, without the photographer, the world would have not known about what was happening here in Prague. And I just want to assure you that you will receive a collection of beautiful photographs that were taken all along, and please use them and spread the word across Europe and beyond about the messages from this summit. You will not get just the photographs, but you have heard several times today we mentioned the Prague Manifesto. Together with Jimmy Jamar in our Brussels office, we have a draft. It's not just a sort of just talking about it. We have a draft, but we want this draft to be further sort of reinforced with many messages that we have heard today. And so we will very soon send the press release with the final Prague Manifesto that you will also all receive. And once again, we will ask you to be our messengers, to be messengers throughout your organizations, your cities, your regions. Let's indeed make many, many more bridges, and let indeed, Petr, truth and love prevail over hatred and destruction. Thank you so much for coming to Prague. Thank you for your support, and see you hopefully next year for the 60th anniversary of Europa Nostra in 2023.